Right, good evening everybody and welcome to this Cheltenham Borough Council Licensing Subcommittee Alcohol and Gambling, which is being held today, Thursday the 5th of March 2026. My name is Councillor Dr David Willingham and I have been elected Chair of this committee. This meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council's YouTube channel and the recording of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in the transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any technical issues are resolved. To the public present, if you are here to make representations to the meeting, you are consenting to the use of the sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware that CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery. The recordings will be held by the Council for 5 months. A fire alarm test is not expected, so if the fire alarm does sound, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exit, which will either be the doors that you came in through, or if they're not available, there's another exit there, and a member of staff or a councillor will help you get out safely out of the building. If you have a mobile phone or another device that makes noise, I would ask if you could please put it on silent so it doesn't disturb the meeting. Right, agenda item number 2. Apologies for absence. There are none. There are 3 councillors here, myself, Councillor Sankey and Councillor Joy. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Do any members need to declare any interests? So I shall put on record that one of the objectors, like myself, is a councillor on Gloucestershire County Council, but that is not a prejudicial interest. Agenda item number 4, which is the determination of a new application for a premises licence. So because this is a regulatory item, members must be present and have heard of the proceedings in their entirety to vote on this item. We will ensure the applicant and the applicant's representative are present in the meeting. I will ask the licensing officer to introduce the report. Members will get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. Then objectors will get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. The applicant or their representative will then finally get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. The objectors will then have an opportunity to address the committee. Members can then ask the objectors questions. The applicant or their representative will then be given the opportunity to present their application, and members can then ask the applicant questions, and the applicant will be given a final right of reply. We may add to this questions from objectors to applicant and applicant to objectors, but this is not a court of law, so there will be questions, not any cross-examination. But the applicant will always get the final say before members move to determination. Members will then retire to debate the matter and we will write the decision notice. We will do that in here. We will ask you to vacate rather than the other way round. And then when we have reached our decision, you will be able to return to the chamber and we will deliver the outcome. So with that, I would like to ask the licensing officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. So we're here today to determine a new premises licence application for Witchwood Festival, made by Tribe Festivals Limited. A copy of the report has been distributed to the applicant and the interested parties. The applicant has applied for a premises licence to permit the licensable activities as detailed in 1.4 in my report. The application was subject to the usual 28-day consultation period, during which a number of relevant representations were received. A response was received from Cheltenham Borough Council's Environmental Health Team, included as Appendix 3 of the report, and the proposed conditions were agreed with by the applicant. Tewkesbury's Environmental Health Team were also consulted with, and their submission is included as Appendix 4. 15 further representations were received from interested parties, and these were all objections. The objections primarily related to the licensing objective of public nuisance. 2 of these comments were received from local councillors, included as Appendix 5. Comment was received from Southern Parish Council and a Gloucestershire County Councillor. These are included as Appendix 6 of the report. The final 11 objection representations from members of the public are included as Appendix 7. of the report. There is a current premises licence in place, which is included in the report as Appendix 8. This new application is seeking to increase capacity numbers from 9,999 to 14,999 and include an additional day, which is Thursday. The authority may grant the licence as applied for, grant the licence subject to modified conditions considered appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, refuse to specify a person in the licence as the premises supervisor, or reject the application. Members must determine this application on its individual merits with a view to promoting the licensing objectives. These are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The consultation period attracted a total of 17 representations, 15 of which were objections. The main concern raised within the representations related to public nuisance. Environmental health should be considered the leading authority regarding the prevention of public nuisance in relation to this application. As part of the conditions proposed and accepted, a noise management plan will be provided. Our environmental health team are here to answer any technical questions. An application for a new premises licence may be refused if this is appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Any decision taken by the committee, however, should be evidence-based and justified as being appropriate and proportionate. In determining the application, the committee must give weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, the representations, including any supporting information presented by all parties, Section 182 guidance, and its own statement of licensing policy. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any member questions for the officer? Yes, Councillor Sankey.
Thank you, Chair. It's sort of a side, really, because I noticed people have complained about parking and that. Is there anything licensing can do with, I know it's the highways down to GCC, but is any liaison that can be done, so obviously that doesn't impact residents quite so much?
I don't think so. It's not relevant to the licensing, to the licensable activities. Highways were consulted during this application, so any comments would have come from highways at the time. Thank you.
So I'll just add to that, anything to do with sort of traffic management around premises would be a planning consideration.
I guess just to add to that, is there anything that we should infer from the lack of a highways response? Is that just they haven't responded, or do we infer they don't have any concerns?
No, so it's planning going to keep responsible authority that consulted. The highway is not part of this, unfortunately. But no planning response would suggest no issue.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from members? Councillor Joy.
I was just wondering, do we have any, if decibel levels, that there are some reports that they've been breached in previous years, do we have any kind of measures in place to kind of like, I mean, I understand that we're trying to put things in place now to try and prevent that from reoccurring, but is there any sort of like, you know, measures we can take, like if it happens to be breached this year, is there anything that we can bring in as a sort of written warning? Are there any sort of measures built into licensing conditions that we can kind of, you know, is it subject to fines or anything like that? How does it work?
I'm unaware of any breaches last year. Any breaches of the licence that are made could lead to a licence review, at which point conditions can be imposed. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, there were no breaches last year.
Can our environmental health, would you like to comment on the absence or the monitoring and what have you, just so that we can have that for the record?
That one. Yeah, there were no breaches last year. Breaching the conditions of the licence could be an offence, and it would be reviewed in accordance with our enforcement policy.
Thank you very much. Are there any further member questions? Okay. So do the objectors have any questions for the licensing officers based on the report and at this point, it's questions only. Councillor Agg.
Thank you, Chair. Question I have relates to monitoring. I'd like to know what monitoring you're looking to provide for the residents who live around the site during the festival, whether it be 3 days or 4 days as proposed. Thank you.
Monitoring last year was undertaken by our environmental protection team. I'll happily defer to them now to... Please go ahead, Gareth.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be monitoring all 4 days. Probably not the entirety of the day because there's not really a lot of need for us to be there at lunchtime. But if it gets the Thursday extension, we'll be there all 4 evenings and nights. I think was probably a better expression.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I'm seeking reassurance in relation to the camping area where parties continue into the night, which is beyond the usual scope of this licensing. And it's the continuation of the nighttime partying that provides a lot of distress and inconvenience and public nuisance to those residents who are desperately trying to sleep beyond the point where the festival terminates and then the parties continue. Thank you.
So do we want to comment on the monitoring and how that would carry on into the evening?
In terms of the licence itself, we're looking to do licensable activities. Anything that is taking place beyond the licence's remit by people who are staying there, that's not part of the licence conditions because the activity is not being carried out by them. There we go.
Yes, if necessary, we will carry on monitoring into the night if we think that's something that needs doing. Like Jake says, it wouldn't be a licence issue. It could, in extreme circumstances, be a statutory nuisance issue, although I very much doubt it. And I would hope that in the real world, that if there was something going on causing so much of a problem that it was affecting people in Prestbury or Southam or surrounding villages, we would be in touch with Wychwood, and I would expect their security team to sort that out very quickly. So, yeah, if needs be, we could be there all night if we think that's a reasonable and proportionate approach to what's going on.
Thank you. We've got a house that's currently being developed on Southam Lane, which actually is very close to, in fact, there's a few residents close to the one of the campsites, which is in green on your plan. And they have young children there. They're currently doing the renovation and they're living in temporary accommodation on site, a shepherd's hut. So there isn't a lot of soundproofing within there. And I'm just worried about the impact that that's going to have, particularly as you're running the festival on a Thursday and a Friday. The Thursday to the Friday is a school day for the child, and obviously that's going to have an impact because I don't want them up all night. Thank you.
I think I get that there's a question in there. I think that moves away from the licensing objectives, because if the camping isn't a licensable activity per se, then it's likely to be a matter for environmental health to deal with if it arises. So I suspect it's very much on the borderline of the things we could materially consider. But please.
That could be dealt with just like any other nuisance complaint could be dealt with. If the property's in Southam Lane, it should be reported to Tewkesbury Borough Council because they could take the appropriate action to protect people within their area. Even if the noise arising is in Cheltenham, Tewkesbury could take the action.
To know if you've approached Tewkesbury to do the monitoring with you on this occasion for a 4-day festival. Thank you.
Yes, I expect they will do at least one night because I don't really want to do all 4. So yeah, I expect they will.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors with questions? Gentleman at the back.
I have a question with, oh, dear me, with reference to the activities list at the front of this application. The application specifies, for example, performance of live music Friday to Monday, 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. That implies that at Monday 9 a.m. I can expect the band to strike up. So is this a 4-day festival or a 5-day festival?
It's just a 4-day festival.
Monday, Sunday, Thursday,
Hang on, hang on.
So it'll go into Monday morning, Sunday through to Monday morning.
But, sorry, it's not according to the application in the sense that last year's application, which followed the pattern you're talking about, actually specified performance of live music Friday to Sunday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. In my parlance, that implies that granting this licence, whether there's billed acts or not, would permit the performance of music through Monday also. That may not be your understanding, but I don't understand why the application is different from the previous granted application in this context, in the activities. Thank you.
Bear with us, we're just looking through the paperwork.
So yeah, I think that's just some tidying up that needs to be done in terms of the hours that are represented on there. The application was to start Thursday at 12 noon and to finish Sunday at 5. Oh no, it's Monday 5 a.m. Sorry, just a second. So yeah, in terms of the 4 days, it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday event from what we can see. But they go through the night, so it's to finish the following day. So 4 events, I suppose you would say, over 5 days is perhaps the more accurate way to put it. Yeah.
I think we can ask the applicant to clarify that when we get to that point in the hearing.
Yes, please.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Gentleman at the front. Yep.
Yes, my question is, why is the stage in the location that is on the existing plan? Because that is as close to houses as practically possible without breaking into other fields. My complaint, if any, is that the stage should be at the other end of the field, pointing towards the station.
I think that's probably not a question for the licensing officers. That's more one for the applicant to cover. So if you would like to raise that when you're speaking, then I'm sure the applicant will make a note of that during your representations, and then they can address that to the committee. I don't think our licensing officers can answer that question. So are there any further questions from the public present, from the objectors? Okay. I now move on to ask whether the applicant has got any questions for the officers as a result of the report.
No, thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, no, thank you very much.
That's fine. Right, at this point, I will now ask the objectors to provide their representations. I think I had a list of 5, and I think there are some to be read by Democratic Services. And we will make a note of the time because the applicant gets the same amount of time as you do. So we are 25 past for starting that. 18:25. So I think Penny Kennard is not here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. So if I can now ask Councillor Agg, it's your opportunity. Ideally, if you could keep it to 10 minutes or less, that would be preferable, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Okay. From evidence gathered during 2024, the festival shows that the event caused significant and measurable disturbance to nearby communities. The proposed variation for 2026, including an additional day, later opening hours, increased capacity, and higher permissible sound levels, raises serious concerns that these issues will worsen. In 2024, residents reported excessive and intrusive noise, including low-frequency vibration felt inside their homes. Sound levels measured during the festival reached 55 to 60 decibels, and in some instances were felt in breach of licensing conditions. Residents described being unable to enjoy their homes or gardens over the 3-day period. Reports included vibrations perceivable, and that was indoors, ornaments vibrating across the mantelpiece, windows and doors were kept closed, the noise levels travelled miles from the racecourse, even into Woodmancote, where I live. Requests for the sound to be turned down were not followed through the practice at that time. This level of intrusion only clearly meets the threshold for public nuisance. In 2026, the applicant significantly wants to increase the festival from 3 to 4 days, operate from noon, 5 a.m. on Thursday to 5 a.m. on subsequent days, i.e. the Monday morning, increasing capacity to 14,999 attendees and allowing higher noise levels of 60 to 65 decibels, which is an increase and an unacceptable increase. This represents major intensifications of this activity. The council has already acknowledged that noise is particularly intrusive at night and it must be balanced, festival ambitions and residents' needs. Adding another day and extending hours until 5 a.m. will dramatically magnify the disturbance already documented back in 2024. Southam is uniquely vulnerable to noise-related harm due to its demographic profile. Evidence submitted to the council confirms that 53.5% of Southam residents are aged 65 plus, the highest proportion in the area. In contrast, nearby Pittville has only 21.9% age 65 plus. Older residents are particularly sensitive to nocturnal noise, low-frequency vibration, sleep disturbance, and associated health effects. The demographic structure of Southam makes extended hours and the higher noise levels especially problematic. The extension to this 4th day, combined with the 5 a.m. finish, would likely cause substantial unacceptable distress. Residents across Park Lane, Shaw Green Lane and Spring Lane reported high disturbance and distressing weekend activity during Wychwood 2024, with many describing the inability to sleep, severe disruption inside their homes, being unable to spend time outside or open windows. While many detailed complaints came from Prestbury, the pattern of disturbance affects all communities surrounding the racecourse, including Southam, especially given its elevated vulnerability. Residents and experts have suggested practical solutions, including relocating and reorientating the stages away from the residential areas, reversing the 23 to 24 changes that brought stages closer to homes, and enhanced noise monitoring. These changes are reasonable and consistent with the licensing objectives, but we would like to see a greater move towards an understanding of the impact this is having on our demographics, on our communities, and I would like to see that that we look to bring about a lower level of decibels in line with what we've had before. Therefore, I object to the increase, and I would like to see the event finish on the Sunday night at the same time as before. And I hope that these considerations would be met. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Right, are there any questions from councillors for the objector? Okay, so I've got one question for you. So you've mentioned the issues with the base, the low frequency vibration from 2024. Following the hearing, I think it was last year, we ended up with a new licensing condition, which was to do with the dB, the decibel, the C-weighted decibel limit, which is a much wider threshold and captures more than your human ear. And the question is, you've not mentioned anything about 2025, which suggests that that condition considerably prevented or diminished the effect of the low frequency noise. So can you give us an idea of what happened in 2025 after that condition was put in place?
After 2025, I didn't have the level of complaints I received previously, but with the additional noise that they wish to raise this time, there will be, and also with the extra day, there will be. So it's those points that we need to address. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right. Are you happy to, if the applicant has any questions for you, with the caveat again, no cross-examination, are you happy to take questions from the? Yep. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair, but I always think licensing hearings that pretend that they're court hearings don't really work. I don't have, thank you, but I don't have any questions.
No, if you're happy that you want to address stuff in your representations, that's fine. We just try and make it as informal and accessible to everyone as we can. So thank you. Right. Are there any further questions? No. Okay. So if I could now ask Mr. Bill Motion to address the committee, please.
Basically, what I've done is looked through the Cheltenham Borough Council response, because it's very much mirrored with the Tewkesbury Borough Council response from the environmental health thing. Paragraph 2 starts off with changes 1 and 2 are unlikely to have any impact on the noise levels experienced around the sites by residents of noise-sensitive properties. Well, the increase in numbers will lead to more camping and more wild camping. There are issues around in rural areas with people just pitching up and camping, and I would anticipate that the increase in numbers is definitely going to lead to something along those lines. And as far as I know, as you say, the licensing is not involved in controlling the wild camping or anything like that. And so it's an issue for the organisers. Are they doing anything about wild camping in here? But ultimately, the wild camping is a noise issue. And you can expect quite a lot of noise to come from that. Obviously, during that phase, there's no sound controls or anything like that. Right, paragraph 5. In reference to the noise guidance 1995 being out of date, is it the case that people have become more deaf since 1995? I don't believe so. Is it that we should accept more noise and disturbance now? Perhaps you could argue that double glazing has improved or something like that, but I'm not convinced about that. I can see how updates to the document are required, but I don't think the sound levels are one of the issues that really require serious attention, especially given the level of amplification that's possible in these things. Right, moving on to paragraph 8 of the Cheltenham Borough Council response. looking at the timetable, as I've already alluded to, the timetable seems to cover much more time. In fact, to me, it still looks like a 5-day festival, given the Sunday, Monday activities, and I'm hoping that will be clarified during the application. It's notable that the Code of Practice, that's the 1995 document, actually specifies 4 days a year. Otherwise, you move into the next row of the table, and that demands much tighter limits on the sound levels here, 15 dBs above the ambient noise. And in Southam, being a rural area, that's basically where I believe the bar was set originally, 55 to 60 dBA. So throughout the rest, paragraph 9 also makes it clear that there are more events planned, so there are clearly more noise days to come than just the Witchwood Festival. So Southam residents can expect more noise from that. I appreciate that's not this licensing application, but nonetheless, it should have some bearing on it. Comment. The comment that the disturbance on Thursday, during Thursdays can be ignored is a bit disingenuous, given that 55 dBAs in my backyard is quite audible, very audible, in fact. And the sound, the bass sounds typically will travel straight through the double glazing. Right, moving on. Right. The paragraph 10, the added guidance giving last year certainly did improve matters. That was a serious improvement as far as we were concerned. It seemed to have a very good effect, although I'm not sure I saw any recordings of the DBC results in the final documents that were published following the festival. It's worth noting, though, that the DBA test that is performed on the properties, the affected noise properties, still excludes the bass levels. So there is still the possibility of quite a lot of bass energy hitting the properties in question. And that's especially important since the lower notes travel much better across the sound and across the terrain. Right. Paragraph 11, my limited experience of recent music events. The officer was talking about his experience of music events. My limited experience of events at the racecourse doesn't stack up with the CBC environmental response, who suggests that the noise levels will be significantly below during the day and unlikely to be near the maximum in the day, later in the day. My experience is that the volume can rise up at any point during the day and will continue to rise and fall in volume throughout the day, usually reaching quite a crescendo come close of play on the main stage. So there's quite a lot there. Paragraph 12, the reference to unduly sensitive individuals is interesting in terms of a CBC opinion. I had thought that the guidance in the Code of Practice represented what had been discovered during the Noise Council's research and therefore represents the average scenario. Unless officers have undertaken a study of the sound attenuation versus the local topography, I'm not sure how they can identify unduly sensitive individuals. Just because someone complains about the noise doesn't mean they don't have just cause. Paragraph 13, my experience is also that the wind direction and strength has a significant effect on the noise and the level of disturbance experienced. However, I'm not convinced that moving the limits will make the slightest difference here. Surely all that will happen is that the artistes will sail close to the new maximum as they can and will end up having to modulate the performance volume in exactly the same way as the wind shifts and moves around on the day. So I still don't see how that would make any real difference to anything that's going on here. So that's to say the performance will be compromised in exactly the same way, whether the volume is 55 dBs or 60 dBs, they will still have the same. If the controls are operating, it will make no difference to the artists. Conclusion. I would like to maintain that given the higher volumes and up to 2,300, the extended duration in days and the increased, and I believe it's still extended much further than has so far been suggested, I would suggest the Witchwood Festival needs to move to another site located more remotely away from Prestbury in Southam and Pitville, as it has outgrown the racecourse. Last year was a success, but this expansion does not build on that success and will undermine the goodwill created last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Sankey.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. You talked about wild camping. Do you mean people that are camping out of the site? Because I wasn't.
There are fields in close proximity to the site and between the site, for example, in Southam, and there's nothing to really, there are public rights of way on those fields, so there's nothing to stop anybody with a rucksack just rolling up and pitching a tent for the night. It's unlikely there'd be any enforcement events on there. You're not going to send the police out to move them on, because they're only going to be there for a few days, would be the argument. So the point I'm really trying to make is that because of the extended size of the festival, you're going to get more wild camping than we've had before. The event is clearly growing, and that's really my point. It's just going to cause more local disturbance and also the clean-up required after the wild camping. I'm not sure, actually, if maybe some of the local farmers might even want to put up a sign and say, you know, £5 a night for a pitch or something. I don't know, but that's my point.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. I think that's something we could follow up, I think.
We probably need to check whether it's a material consideration for the licence. I have a feeling a separate field might move us into planning, but actually the officers may be able to either answer that now or have a quick look.
Yeah, as we're not licensing any sort of camping or any of that sort of matter, it wouldn't really come into this. We wouldn't be able to extend the licensable area for any application either. We've had our consultation process with a plan. So in terms of licensable activities, we're limited to the area submitted as if part of the application. Just a bit on more of that. If we come back to, there was a question earlier about the hours. I've gone through them again. It's quite clear from the application that there are 4 days intended. However they run through. Our data entry maybe isn't the best. So I think what we can do is update the way we've entered our data. Instead of listing it as Friday to Monday, 9 till 5, what we can do is list the timings until 11:59 for each day, and list the second timing for the sort of midnight to 5 a.m. part. So we can tidy that up. The only thing members may want to consider is that, although it's a 4-day event, it does cover 5 days. And there is a condition that references the 4 days, I believe. So it might just be a case of tightening up that condition as well.
I think that's a technical thing we will need to look at when we get to that point. Thank you. Any further questions for the objector? Councillor Joy.
I was just wondering offhand, do you have specific numbers? I mean, do you have numbers of people who you've seen or encountered wild camping in the past? Like, is this, like, do you have any, like, not to say that I don't believe you or anything, but do you have any sort of like substantial data figures for it?
I have no specific information at all at this point. I mean, the best I could do probably would be to nip out into the field and take pictures, and I haven't done that this far. Okay?
No, that's really helpful, because I'm just kind of thinking we are looking at a 50% increase of attendees. So I would imagine that if there were a handful of people who have done it in the past, there might maybe like half a handful more. So like, you know, but it's just trying to get some ideas of like how risky this is, and how to best mitigate it. I didn't know if there may be a potential to cordon off the area at risk if you feel like it's a significant one, but it could be a health and safety thing.
I think we need to work out whether it's actually material to the licence first before we look at what we can do. And that's the key check. Are there any further questions? Well, none from me. So we now move on to Steve Lennon. If you can press the button and then it's your opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Steve Lennon. I'm the chairman of Southam Parish Council. Initially, on behalf of Southam Parish Council, in relation to the 2005 festival, I would like to thank the event organisers, Cheltenham Borough Council Environmental Protection Team and Tewkesbury Borough Council Environmental Health Team for the coordinated efforts in 2025 to reduce the impact on the local community, certainly leading to fewer complaints. That was marked compared to the problems of 2024. Albeit we may have been fortunate last year with wind direction, but it was certainly a more positive experience. Also to say that the Parish Council do not object to the festival being held, but we are very concerned that the changes now proposed will undo the progress that was made in 2025. Therefore, Southern Parish Council objects to the licence application on the following grounds. Initially, within the application summary, it refers to the festival as being a family-focused event. But when we look at the activity timeframes for music and alcohol sales in particular, that doesn't really seem to align with a family-focused event. Supply of alcohol till 5 a.m. That's also not conducive with creating a quiet nighttime environment, mindful of the neighbouring residents. And as has already been alluded to, we have had complaints regarding campsite noise in the early hours, and I know that has been referred to in the representations that have been made to this current application. In relation to allowing music to be played until 5 a.m, again, that feels excessive, so close to residential areas. Having considered the original response from the applicant, it was headed Representative 14. It was then updated, responding to comments that were made by objectors during the consultation, I believe. And the reference to a family-focused event seems to be missing from that current statement. So I would ask for a clarification. Is it no longer considered to be a family-focused event? With regard to the additional day, the Thursday, SPC believe this has potential to cause increased noise nuisance to residents. Again, as was touched on earlier, CBC Environmental Protection seem to have dismissed the potential impact of the Thursday, particularly in relation to referring to the POP code, so that the 3-day parameter can apply. And I know that the bill referred to that area. This dismissal of the Thursday just appears to be rather arbitrary, unless there is any other substantiation that can be provided. Thirdly, our concerns are in relation to the increased capacity of just around about 10,000 up to 15,000, a 50% increase. In the CBC response, they referred to an increase in capacity and the extension of the licensed area. I just wanted to clarify in relation to the licensed area, is that to be extended? Because we did see back in December at the consultation, and in fact a a Zoom call we had, there was reference to an additional field. So it'd be helpful if we could have clarification on the parameters that you believe can achieve the capacity that's required, and whether that is with the current drawing. In addition to the increased capacity, CBC also commented that they felt that increased capacity and increase in licensed area are unlikely to have any impact on noise levels. We would be interested to know what detail that assertion is based on, because there was no substantiation to sit behind that. We've assumed from the drawing that's attached to the hearing documents that the capacity of 14,999 is catered for within that layout, but we would like clarification. Similarly, in relation to traffic route, in the December consultation, there was reference to a route from the B4623, which is Southern Road up near Ellenborough, in order to gain access from that side of the site. Again, we would request clarification as to whether that is a consideration, and if that is a consideration, have GCC Highways been consulted? In summary, in relation to increased capacity, we do believe that it's likely to lead to issues in relation to increased noise nuisance, traffic congestion, and traffic safety issues. We do believe that to accommodate the increased capacity, it may well provide an opportunity to replan the layout of the site and to mitigate the potential nuisance significantly. From the detailed layout of the stage area, it does appear, and the drawing is relatively small scale and it's difficult to pick up on some of the detail, but it does appear that the stage position seems to have moved closer to the residential areas, having been moved away in 2025. Now, I know that was one mitigation that did happen in 2025. Perhaps the applicant could clarify that for us. We do maintain that the layout should be reviewed, so noise generating activities such as the stage and the campsite can be moved back to the west, away from the residential areas as pre-2023, when there were no noise issues. To deal next with the increase in target noise, we doubt currently that the current noise level is losing ticket sales. I assume there's been quite a demand, hence the request for increasing capacity. So even at last year's more moderate levels, we assume that generated a commercial demand. The increase in noise level wasn't actually referred to when we had the December consultation, so it did come as a bit of a surprise when we came to the January application. We do believe that customers at the festival are unlikely to notice the increase that's being proposed in amongst the background of other festival noise. But conversely, the increase in noise level experienced in a quiet residential location will cause significant further nuisance, and in particular, the thump of the bass, which we have referred to. Similarly, coming back to the family-focused event classification as such, we do see at lots of events parents using ear defenders to prevent damaging children's hearing whilst they're enjoying events. And it does seem to increase noise levels, does appear irresponsible in that context. In conclusion, we've had one successful year last year, which we were grateful for since the change in location. The significant changes all appear to be in one direction: increased day, increased capacity, increased noise levels. We believe with only one outcome: increased potential for nuisance. We haven't seen anything described referring to balancing mitigation. At this stage, it's disappointing that the organisers wish to benefit commercially from the increased capacity and the increased day, but it appears from what we've seen that they're not willing to replan the layout to mitigate the nuisance. Just finally, in relation to monitoring, as I mentioned at the beginning of my submission, we were very grateful for the input of CBC and TBC in the monitoring, and I did meet some of the guys on the ground during the evenings of last year at the festival, and it will be helpful to have from CBC and TBC their coverage as to how they intend to undertake the monitoring, and so that we could have that close liaison again. That concludes my comments from Southern Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Okay. Thank you very much for your representation. I'm not sure so none of us seem to have any questions at the moment. I think it's clear what you're saying, so thank you very much for that. Right, if I could now move on to our final speaker in person, Desmond Isles, please.
I have no other comment to make. I'm afraid Councillor Agg, Mr Motion and Mr Lennox have covered all the points that I would like to have raised. So I have no other comment other than what I said earlier about the positioning of the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will ask if there are any further questions. Thank you for being here and obviously taking the time to attend. Then I'm sorry everyone's stolen your thunder. I would now like to ask our Democratic Services Officer to read the statements from David Padfield and Karen Galpin, please.
I'll start with this statement from Dan Padfield. Thank you for reading my disclosure today. I'm sad not to be in attendance, but I'm caring for my partner and cannot risk bringing any infection into her home. I am writing this because of her. She lives on Park Lane, less than 450 metres from the main stage at Wychwood. She is bedbound with very severe ME and has been confined to the same room for more or less 6 years. And by bedbound, I really mean it. She does not leave her bed. She cannot speak. She suffers from extreme neuropathic pain. Her fatigue means that she cannot watch telly, listen to podcasts or read. Her quality of life is essentially zero, yet she fights every day. She loves music and festivals. She would love to go to Wychwood and listen to some of the acts from her youth, especially Daniel Bedingfield last year. Right now, she cannot listen to music due to extreme sound sensitivity. It just causes pain. Being bedbound does mean she has been at home in Park Lane for at least the last 6 festivals. There was never any issue until 2024. In 2024, to reiterate, I could feel the bass in the kitchen. I could hear the lyrics to Ocean Colour Scene from Pittville Park over 2 kilometres away. She could feel vibrations through her bed frame. She had to be alone more as she was so overwhelmed by it. Had to spend more time with her earplugs in, although the noise still penetrated and her condition worsened and she's never really recovered. The conditions of this new licence will make that damage experience acceptable. Levels that resulted in at least 23 complaints in a review of the licence before 2025. In 2024, the max volume of the site was 60 dB, which is the new proposed target volume. If this new licence is accepted, then you're allowing 2024 to happen all over again, year after year, and that will be within the licence conditions. There is nothing anyone will be able to do. After the problems of 2024, this feels alarmingly short-sighted. It is true that 2025 went much better. Wychwood implemented extra sound mitigation methods such as slightly moving the stage, closer and more frequent monitoring, using technical equipment such as delay speakers and more to mitigate sound disturbance. This was completely in response to the number of complaints and the review process, the power of the residents. In 2025, we also got lucky as the wind was blowing away from Prestbury. I suspect the organisers know this and is one of the reasons for the proposed changes. If you change the licence conditions, they do not necessarily need to have such advanced sound mitigation anymore, as they can legally go louder. Sure, Wychwood and Environmental Health reassure us that these noise levels won't be reached for most of the event, that they allow levels to be managed better than lower limits. But in reality, changing the limits means the festival could, if they wanted, blast at 65 dB for 3 days straight, and there is nothing anyone can do. It all comes down to trust. Consequently, you should reject this change, or you could propose timings when the festival can have certain noise levels. The guidance is so vague that you can set the level at your discretion. If Wychwood is worried about the wind direction and adhering to the licence, then they could think more creatively about their setup and move the stage. The proposed changes feel like the easy way out. And there are a couple of questions that come up that I have not had good answers to. Number one, if the festival ran so well last year and everyone had a good time and Wychwood implemented new effective sound mitigation strategies, what is the need for the licence change? Is it the threat of wind? Number two, we spoke to Harry at Proud Events in December and this change was not mentioned and yet appeared in January. Other proposed changes, one of which was moving the stage a little further away from Park Lane, disappeared. How did this change come about in 1 month over Christmas and not from between June to December? Number three, what is an average individual that is mentioned by Environmental Health in their response? This feels like it is meant to circumvent the severe impact on my partner and other vulnerable members of the community. Because it wasn't just my partner who suffered. Park Lane and Southam have a high proportion of elderly residents who were also affected in 2024. A letter drop was done because A, Wychwood did not inform the local community how to contact them or complain, and B, Environmental Health did no monitoring. The only reason the positive changes that Wychwood and Environmental Health now champion, were made because of the residents, and we will be there again this year, because right now, although we have a voice, it does not seem to make a difference. Thank you for your time. Dan Padfield.
Thank you very much. And then we can ask for the second one to be read, or is it just one on behalf of two people?
No.
Right, okay.
So I'm reading this on behalf of Karen Galpin, who couldn't be here. Dear councillors, with reference to your policy vision statement, we want Cheltenham to be a safe and clean town that offers greater diversity in the nighttime economy, that is less focused on alcohol and protects the quality of life for residents. How is the quality of life of local residents protected when noise levels are to be increased over and above those experienced in 2024, when residents were forced to barricade themselves inside their homes to try to escape the intense noise pollution? 2025 was an improvement, with stricter monitoring and control measures in place and a better experience all round. So why is there a need to increase sound levels, risking further disturbance, excessive noise intrusion and more complaints? With reference to the policy considerations of ensuring that the premises, layout and condition are acceptable and appropriate for their proposed use, how can the location and layout of Wychwood be suitable when the main stages are located a mere 400 metres away from neighbouring properties? The ongoing further expansion of the event surely makes the current location unsuitable, or at least the locations of the stages, which are currently not stipulated as a condition of the licence and at the sole discretion of the organisers. Policy considerations in the report of the licensing officer, Public Nuisance 4.13, also include restricting noise emissions to below levels that could affect people in the facility going about their business at work and when at home, both while relaxing and while sleeping. The existing noise limits, now with more stringent monitoring and control, appeal so far to largely comply with this, but A, this has not yet been tested in different weather conditions. The wind direction was favourable for Prestbury residents in 2025. And B, there is a general risk that the increases proposed will once again negatively impact on the quality of life of people living nearby. Regarding the representation response from Proud Events, representation 7, which states a 24-hour resident contact number will be in operation from Thursday through to Monday for residents to raise concerns. This number will be staffed 24 hours a day. And Appendix 3, which mentions a communications plan for informing nearby residents. It would be good to understand what that plan entails, i.e. will contact details be distributed via leaflet drop to residents, and if so, to which roads in the vicinity? Merely adding it to a different locate page on their website is not going to be sufficient. In Appendix 3, the Wychwood response for licensing application January 2026, it states, in 2024, complaints were received from 15 members of the public regarding off-site noise levels. However, on balance, it should be noted that 2 reports were also received in support of the event and indicated that they had been requested to make a complaint by someone else. Can it please be understood, once and for all, that no one was encouraged or requested to make a complaint? In the absence of any consultation with or contact information circulated to local residents by the organisers in 2024, a note was distributed to the closest properties of the site location, which included contact details in case any residents had wanted to give a point of view but did not know how to do so. On a final note, Cameron Thomas, Lib Dem MP, reached out to the organisers of Wychwood some weeks ago to request a meeting after hearing about the concerns about the potential licence revisions from a number of his constituents. At the time of writing this representation, which was Tuesday the 3rd of March, he has still not received a response from them. This, despite the organisers stating their intention to engage and consult with the local community. I would ask you to reject the proposed increases to the sound levels.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've heard from all of the objectors at the moment, and I'm just going to make a note of the time. So at this point, I would now like to ask the applicant to address the committee, please.
Very good. I just asked this. I'm happy to crack on. As we've been going for an hour, do you want to come for a break for a minute? It seems the opportune moment, but if you don't, happy to go on.
It sounds like that's a reasonable suggestion. So shall we take if we look to come back at 7:15, that will give you time to have any conversations you need with your client, and people can have a comfort break, grab some water. So we'll come back at 7:15.
Thanks a lot.
Right, we're just going to restart the live stream. It looks like we've got all the councillors, all of the objectors, and I think we've got all of the applicants' party back as well. Are we ready? Are we one missing?
Is he on his way or?
Do you want me to wait for him or do you want to carry on?
Very happy to carry on.
In which case, over to you to present your case.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It perhaps isn't going to be any great surprise that we have a slightly different position to present to you today. That's rather the nature of these things. But what I just want to say, to be clear to the residents as well as yourselves, we're not here to be awkward. It just is a bit the construct of how we are in a licensing committee hearing, that we obviously want to present our case. And in presenting our case, we'll be saying things that don't align with what's been said to you before now. The engagement that we have with the community, the commitment that we have to engage with the community is not to be treated as in any way being challenged by me appearing a bit awkward in the next half an hour, if that makes sense. And it's important that that's said, because the conversations, dialogue and discussions will continue after this evening, come what may. So first of all, this is a legitimate application, and much of the concerns that you have heard about today, and indeed the complaints, are not fair. If we take as an example the almost penultimate point this evening, that we've not engaged with the Liberal MP, I mean, that is respectfully false. We are engaged with them. Their diary, unsurprisingly, is a bit challenging, and there is a date in order to visit the site and engage that has been agreed before now. Now, what's that got to do with the licensing objectives? Well, you may very well say to me, actually nothing, but it does illustrate respectfully a point that I will be inviting the committee to reflect upon, that one might have a completely different impression of this festival, having heard the last hour and a quarter or so of material. We are astonished that anyone might suggest that we're not a family festival, particularly having won Best Family Festival of the Year at the National Festival Awards in 2025. And if councillors have been in attendance, you need only attend, or you need only look at the acts, artists, and all of the activities on site to know that we are just that, a family festival. What we might not be is a festival for every family. The suggestion that in some way we are irresponsible because parents take their children to a festival and get them to wear ear defenders, it appears to me extraordinary, respectfully. That is not a fair observation about the operation or the premises. And that then leads to, and I'll be inviting you to look carefully at, Appendix 3. Environmental Health Officer has submitted a comprehensive representation. I appreciate they're here this evening and they can defend themselves, but if they forgive me, I'm about to give them 5 minutes where I suggest that the challenges, the criticisms from what was called at the start of the hearing the leading authority in respect of noise. That was the quote from Top Desk, but it's your policy and for your legal officer, paragraph 912 of the National Guidance. Everybody in licensing knows that the officers are effectively the guardians and custodians of the policy and are generally recognised as the experts. Their representations are open to scrutiny, of course, but the idea, as was suggested, I felt, that they in some way were not fulfilling their functions or doing themselves proud in terms of the representation, I'm bound to take significant issue with you, and I will be asking you to reflect very carefully on the critiques that were levelled at them. It is, and sorry to appear sharp, it seemed to me during the representation comments that what was being said is, we don't like what you've said. But that is not the same as saying you are wrong. And let us deal with what Appendix 3 says. It says, increase in maximum capacity to 14,999 will not adversely impact the licensing objective as regards public nuisance. And as far as I can see, nobody is suggesting that any other licensing objective is engaged this evening at all. So I'm not proposing to address you on those. You understand the police have not served a representation. It wouldn't really be able to be challenged that they are the guardians and custodians of crime and disorder. Paragraph 912 again makes that abundantly plain, as does your policy. I don't see, respectfully, that public safety or indeed protection of children farm is either raised in the representations or could be raised. And that capacity, of course, has been engaged upon with all of the responsible authorities, and the authorities who engage proactively here, Appendix 4 is the Tewkesbury Borough Council representation, say to you very clearly the licensing objectives couldn't be undermined by this proposal. I should add, which did not seem to be pointed out earlier, and I'm sure the committee have picked up on it, that the conditions that are set out in the Appendix 1 at the back of the licensing application provide specific reference to the fact that in year one, the proposal is that it would be limited to 12,999. So it's a stepped approach that is being proposed. And it, I hope, will not come as any great surprise to the committee that there was pre-application consultation and dialogue with the responsible authorities, again as your policy advisors, again as the national guidance advisors, prior to the submission of the application. It was touched on in some of the questions asked earlier as to what is one to infer from the absence of a representation. I'll touch on that if I may. It is a positive affirmation that the officer considers the application to be legitimate. That is what we submit to you, and let me just explain why. Because absent a representation, these applications all must be granted automatically. And 20 plus years into the legislation, it's not feasible to believe the officers don't understand that. So the choice to not serve a representation is a positive affirmation, which I'll again be asking you to reflect on carefully. But what is unusual here is that there are two positive representations that support the application and invite you to the conclusion it should be granted. Yeah, that'll be from the two experts. The first expert, your environmental health officer. They go on to say that the Thursday is not a point of concern that would likely undermine the licensing objectives. And they go on to say that the proposed noise changes to the absolute limits will not undermine the licensing objectives. So to be clear, were you to conclude that those parts of the application were illegitimate, you would by implication be concluding that your environmental health officer was wrong. And I would caution you very carefully against that. But I'm going to take you through the Appendix 3, if I may. There's a couple of points just to bring. I appreciate you've read it all, but just to take you through that. So, program of noise monitoring around the site, very similar to the program operated last year, successfully delivered an event that complied with noise limits. There's a suggestion that we are in breach of conditions or that we have not historically delivered to our noise limits. That is not true. Full stop. That is not to say that there were not 15 complaints, bottom paragraph, in 2024. But let's be clear, the extent of the case that is against us is 2024 wasn't very good, and there were 15 complaints. Now, I don't belittle the 15 complaints, but we were not in breach, we did not exceed our limits, and the extent of the criticism is 15 complaints were lodged. One might have thought that there was more of a problem than that would perhaps suggest. The second point just to make is it is the officer who says in that last paragraph that a couple of people indicated that they had been requested to make a complaint by someone else. I didn't say that. That's what the officer said. And so the challenge that's made to suggest that that's wrong or false is not a challenge against the licensee as a challenge to the officer having said something wrong. And I will return to the point of sensitivity that is touched on in the representation, but that might be an indication of sensitivity. We know that there was a review and that conditions were imposed to low frequency noise. And to be fair to those conditions, they delivered. Those conditions are proposed within the application. There is no attempt to go behind those. They are included word for word in the application. And they delivered exactly as anticipated to the standard anticipated. That we had an issue, which I say was more moderate than perhaps you might have first believed, but nonetheless, suggestion is there's an issue, conditions are attached, and then we don't have an issue. That, I say, is very significant. Going through the document, there's some, the historic, if we can agree on the word historic, quotes about the POP Code 1995 and whether it is or isn't the valid document. It is guidance only in any event. But you have a very clear articulation of the thought process around why the Thursday will not cause a public nuisance. And that's what we are concerned with entirely, is will this cause a public nuisance? It is not, respectfully, will this have any impact at all on anybody? We know that there will be some impact, but as perhaps you will have seen in the conditions, so it's the second stage only that will operate that night. It will only be proposed to operate until 11 p.m. In all reality, it's going to be a campers only day. There's no day tickets available on a Thursday. And the noise limits are proposed to be moderated as per 55 as the target and 60 as the limit till 11 p.m. It is a completely different day. Yes, the bars are proposed to be open, and yes, the late night refreshment is proposed. But we say unashamedly Thursday will actively promote the licensing objectives, particularly helpfully allowing vehicles to arrive a day earlier, particularly camper vans and the like, aiding ingress. But there, to be clear, there's no nuisance created by traffic because of this event. I mean, you will all be familiar with Gold Cup Day and the festival. 70,000 half a mile up the road, or 12,500 here. I leave the point with you. I'm not for a moment suggesting that the festival creates, that the racing creates public nuisance, but there's a proportionality point here. And the photographs that were produced, which I appreciate the indication from the committee was that they may or may not be of particular relevance, does go to the sensitivity point. There's no suggestion that there's anything illegal about where those cars are. It's just that there's more cars on that lane than there would otherwise be. There's no obstruction. There's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing improper about it. It's just there are more cars in that vicinity. That's not public nuisance. And that is all that we can concern ourselves with. There's reference to, in the representations, the fact that there will be other events at this site. Officer deals with that. And the officer says, if I could put it coarsely, I appreciate it's put more elegantly than this, you can't refuse an application because there might be another event at some point in the future that hasn't yet submitted an application. It goes on and talks about, as you can see, the guidance and the sensitivity point. And I think that there is something to be reflected on in terms of the sensitivity point from what you've heard earlier. And there's an explanation about weather, noise limits and so forth. Let's just be clear about what the weather and the noise limits mean. We're not proposing, and it was suggested we would play at 65 for 4 days on the trot and there's not a thing anybody could do about it. That's not true. We have a target level of 60 with a specific provision to bring levels back in the event that they exceed that, but at 65, it's an absolute limit. We're not here to play at 65. We're here to play at 60, but to have some sense of proportionality some sense of reasonableness. And that 65, to be clear, is what anybody would call a national standard. Now, you will fairly say to me, well, it's each application on its individual merits, and I accept that. And if I give you a list of 10 premises, 10 festivals that have 65 and a list of 10 festivals that have 70 as a limit and 10 that have 75 as a limit, you'll say, well, we don't care, this is about this application. And that's a fair point. But by the same token, it is indicative of the fact that there is an unduly restrictive and inappropriate condition that is not protecting public nuisance, it's protecting something more than that, and that's not appropriate. 65, we say unashamedly, is a national standard that protects public nuisance. We're not here, all of these commercial accusations made against us, we're not here to undermine the licensing objectives. We do not want you to grant this so that we can cause public nuisance. We are here to say we will not cause public nuisance, but you can be legitimately confident that we will monitor, supervise and control the noise in such a way that at 65 we are in good order. And you get to the end of the representation and you have the comprehensive schedule of conditions that are provided for, including the communications plan. I'll not read those to you, and I suspect the time probably doesn't allow me to in any event, but you get the point. One of the points is about wild camping. May I just ask a question, rhetorical, I grant you. Why would anybody camp when we provide camping? What is the possible logic for anybody wild camping in circumstances where the festival would provide it? We know nothing about wild camping. We don't accept that it's anything to do with us. And as far as we could tell, based on the councillor's questions, it was pretty unclear as to what it could possibly be said to have to do with us. On to the Tewkesbury Appendix 4 representation. This is an unusual representation as well, because it says effectively that everything is considered sufficient to uphold the licensing objective of public nuisance. It's a positive representation that says, we understand the application, we engage with Cheltenham, we know what's being proposed, and there is nothing about this application that would undermine the licensing objectives. Now, from an unusual perspective, it's not that unusual for the neighbouring authority to serve a representation. When the representation says, please don't grant this application because we have concerns about it. I would suggest to you that it's unusual for them to say, we've read the application, we've engaged with Cheltenham, we've seen the conditions they've proposed, we are entirely content with what's being proposed. Not only entirely content, let's use the words they say, supports the recommendation that the off-site noise limits be amended to. There are positive representations, and then there's this. The third expert on whom I would like to raise the legitimacy of these applications is Bob Singh, who sits to my left. He has already engaged with environmental health. He was responsible for monitoring the events last year and delivering the sound impacts. I did check with him earlier. The stages are not moving, and the suggestion that they are is, again, incorrect. He has done an assessment of 2025, working closely with the officers who were on site, some wind. We did have some complaints, or inquiries as he refers to them. We had 7. All were investigated, and a number of the complainants were perfectly satisfied following explanation of monitoring procedures and the licensed limits, because the actual limit, what does it mean? There's some reference in one of the representations to this application tripling the intensity of sound. I mean, respectfully, I just can't accept some of the scientific or technical arguments that are advanced here, but that isn't something that we would recognise. Obviously, you may have questions of Bob in due course, but he will tell you that the existing conditions are overly restrictive and unnecessary, or in the modern parlance, inappropriate, as we like to say in licensing. There's a balance, and you'll all be familiar with licensing being full of balance and proportionality. The balance between the organiser, the event, the customer, the attendee, and ensuring we don't cause public nuisance. And he says 60 target, 65 limit, perfectly legitimate on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he could also talk to you about events that have a 75 permission, as some events do. We're not arguing for 75, but the idea that 65 is in some way breaching a ceiling, it happens that we've had 60 for some years. That's a quirk, and respectfully, that's out of date, and that is doing more than it needs to do. We have to protect against public nuisance, not protect against tranquility or similar. We do accept, of course, that there is a nervousness with change, and there's a nervousness with risk. But let me just deal with the issue of risk briefly. All licence applications have risk. If they didn't, it wouldn't be a regulated activity. That's every pub, bar, hotel, restaurant, and self-evidently every festival. If because a resident said, I am anxious and concerned about what this might mean, that, I'm afraid, would cause every application to fail by its very nature. And again, I'm not patronising you by quoting your cultural strategies, but you'll be familiar with them. We have to balance risk. We have to undertake a risk assessment. In the context of really what we're talking about, that's the sound management plan that has been drafted by Johns Nash, and I'll just give you the headlines. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, sir. Have I got about halfway? About? Thanks.
Yes, carry on.
Thanks. May I say that, please, I'm trying to canter along, as you will realise. If at any point you just need to say slow down, please do. But there's a draft management plan. I can't recall if it's been exchanged with Environmental Health as yet, but there are provisions in the licence conditions for it to be exchanged sometime in advance. It's broadly modelled on the 2025 noise management plan, which I think we probably all agreed was a success. But let me just take you through some of the points within that. Stage positions will align with 2025. That's in the noise management plan. There'll be an increased level of monitoring, Park Lane and Southam Lane, following feedback that we need to develop that. There's going to be additional sound checks conducted on the day preceding any activities, just to make sure we're set up properly. There are going to be additional consultants working with Bob and his team in order to ensure that we've got better or more mobile provision for people to get out to anybody who expresses concern quickly and to undertake assessments to check to see whether there is anything amiss. The report itself touches on the point I've made about the existing conditions being unnecessarily restrictive, but I've rather made that point. It goes on to talk about low frequency noise and talks about the conditions that were imposed by committee at the review remaining and undoubtedly delivering actually the substance of the concern that's ever been articulated before. There is a section on sound system design and setup, how the sound systems are set up, where the speakers face, how it is that they can manage noise. And there's reference, and I'm afraid at this point I'm likely to either lose you or I'm likely to lose myself, with reference to cardio sub-arrays, which will be integrated to limit rear projection of low frequency sound and so forth. And Bob can speak to that. There's reference in the representations to generators, and I think it's a simple query. If you're going to have diesel run generators, they're noisy. And I think Bob is on top of that, and they will be silent running generators in any event. In reference to the management of people, crowd noise, it's touched on in the representations. I have to say, I don't accept that people in camping is likely generating what could fairly be described as a public nuisance. But that does not mean we're not responsible. And we monitor and supervise our campsites. Reference was made to security and stewarding earlier. They patrol. There's a safeguarding element inevitably in a campsite as well. And what we should remember from a practical and, dare I say, a commercial perspective, The great majority of the attendees on site are sleeping under canvas. It doesn't really work for us to have people who are disturbing the other campers who are in canvas. They're not behind the double glazing that was mentioned before. And we do have families, people do go back to the tents, some earlier than others. And to be frank, sometimes pretty simple. A couple of families go, one couple go out one night and the other couple supervise and babysit. The other couple go out the other night and maybe they all go out the following night or not. But they are under canvas predominantly. So the anxieties and in immediate proximity to the activities. And so we have to be sensitive to that. Joins National will be on site throughout, monitoring as I've touched on. They have a procedure for responding to and dealing with inquiries, and I think it picks up on a point that Councillor Agg asked me to address on. There will be a complaints number that will be circulated. We are entirely content to circulate that as widely as possible, and we're happy to work with the councillor on that. We obviously have contact with some residents, as reference to the Teams meeting and so forth has already been brought to your attention. We'll circulate it as widely as you would like us to. There's no attempt not to do that. And whether that is through and or with your environmental health team, happy to do that. That leads neatly on to local authority liaison. Local authority liaison is pretty constant, really. There's on-site dialogue, there's pre-application dialogue, there's pre-event dialogue, there's post-event dialogue. One of the criticisms levelled earlier today was that there had not been transparency about the noise limits and or levels. I'm afraid that's wrong. There was absolute transparency. It was all provided to the environmental health team in line with the noise management plan and our agreements and discussions last year. And so if it was suggested that we were in breach of our condition there, that's, I'm afraid, not accepted. There's full and comprehensive post-event reporting. There's safety advisory group debriefs with all of the various other officers and so forth. And I do make the point, you can draw your conclusions about how the event was considered last year, or indeed in 2024, 23, said it was nearer the racecourse before that, by the lack of officer complaint or concern. Forgive me. A couple of other additional points, if I may. One, if you turn to page 57 of the report, you'll see the existing licence. Something's been made about the hours of operation. Much as I am, I hope, advancing a fairly decent defence of your environmental health officer's report, one polite criticism I'd offer of the person who produced the premises licence is that the key here is to have the words the morning after or the morning following, where the document is produced on that first page. Everyone knows that we have not applied to extend our hours on Sunday night or Monday. We have the existing permission. The Thursday is the extension here. But on the Monday, we already have exactly the same permission as we have applied for. There's no attempt to extend the hours there. It's just that it probably is a little bit obstructed, if I may say so, by the words, well, the lack of the morning following or similar on the face of the licence. And candidly, you only need to look back at our application form when last we applied to see that. So there's no change there at all. And as regards the four-day point, I mean, I don't know if you want me to address you on it, but it's contained within the Environmental Health Officer's penultimate paragraph, second page. That's generally the view people take. It's a 4-day event, but does it technically run into the Monday? Yes. Does that obstruct a transparent understanding of what we're doing this evening? No. You need only look at the licence application to see that we have properly and correctly applied for the correct hours. So there's also, if I may say, a document that I think you have produced, and forgive me for addressing you on a document that you've produced, and you'll probably raise it later. But when we look at what 50 to 60 looks like, it says an open plan office. So perhaps like this. or heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall is not public nuisance, and nor are normal voices at 1 metre away. I appreciate I'm on a microphone, but I'm a bit more than 1 metre away from you. I think it would be a stretch, and I appreciate I can drone on, but I hope that it would be a challenge for someone to say that my speaking voice is a public nuisance. Councillor looks at me like I may not want to pursue that point, and I apologise. But your report also says that at the bottom of that report, a 3 dB change is the minimum perceptible under normal conditions. So I do ask you again to reflect on that. In terms of a couple of other points, if I may. Forgive me, just checking my notes. Yes, the licence conditions in the application provide for both dialogue with your safety advisory group and the production effectively of an event management plan. Just talk to that, if I may. Event management plan is, for want of a better phrase, the suite of risk assessments, documents, policies and procedures that go into the delivery of this event, covering everything: alcohol, safeguarding, security, camping, etc., of which the noise management plan is a part. And those documents are effectively considered and assessed. I think it's a stretch to say approved, but considered and assessed by what's called the Safety Advisory Group. And the Safety Advisory Group comprises not just the responsible authorities, but all of the other officers that you would expect that would be engaged in this sort of thing. So as an example, the ambulance service, they're not a responsible authority licensing application, but they'd be engaged in Safety Advisory Group, and the highways team. And I make the highways team for the hint, perhaps, in a couple of the representations, say we're concerned about the Thursday for traffic. We say the opposite is right. We say it'll alleviate the issue. But they were perfectly entitled to serve a representation. You don't have to be a responsible authority to serve representation. Any of the Safety Advisory Group officers could have served representation. And I ask you just to reflect on that as well. We also just would raise with you the national guidance, a new paragraph introduced by the government, I think at the end of last year. Forgive me, it may have been October, it may have been November. And what that says is when making licensing decisions, all licensing authorities should consider the need to promote growth and deliver economic benefits. We do say that's a material consideration for you. And again, your legal officer will advise you, but you're obliged to consider the national guidance. It's guidance, so you may choose not to. But generally, there's a recognition that the guidance issued under Section 182 is instructive, and your policy makes some comment about it as well. This application is offering us the opportunity to develop and grow. We've been there for a long time. We deliver to an exceptional standard. And I make no apology for saying that. You might not have thought that at the end of the representations being raised, but we deliver to an exceptional standard. We are the award-winning festival. I think last time I was in front of you, we were the award-nominated festival. So I'm bound to make that point, that when you come to consider this application, what you're essentially going to be doing is balancing risk. It's not about us proving to beyond a reasonable doubt that there is no risk whatsoever of anything going wrong here. That is not the legal test. It might have appeared that from some of the representations. The test is what is likely to happen on a balance of probabilities. And we say the licensing objectives will be promoted. And the Environmental Health Officer says the licensing objectives will be promoted. And Tewkesbury Borough Council say the licensing objectives will be promoted. And the residents in attendance today and those who've written say we're not so sure. We are concerned. We are anxious. And respectfully, I say that when you come then to do that balancing exercise, how do we decide if we are right? that the case is overwhelmingly in favour of the grant of the application, because to not find in favour of the application is essentially to conclude that the environmental health teams and the acoustician are wrong. And we're respectful of the fact there's anxiety. You then, I'd suggest, take comfort from the fact that we can be reviewed. If we get this wrong, I'm going to have some egg on my face when perhaps next I appear in front of you. We would all be embarrassed and awkward were things to go awry. But if I ask you to reflect on the number of times an application has been granted by this committee for the premises never to come back again, for the concerns not to materialise, because applicants put their shoulder to the wheel and they do a good job. And they, it may be suggested, are doing a good job for their own benefit, and that may be true. But they're being supervised and monitored, not just by the Environmental Health Service of two authorities. They're going to be pretty closely scrutinised by these residents. And so our not taking this challenge responsibly and accepting that we need to do this properly would be, respectfully to my clients, lunacy. That's probably enough from me, and I think I'm just about on time. But may I just ask Mr. Singh particularly if there are any points, just as regards the noise that he wants to develop, or any points you feel I've got wrong or indeed missed? No. Yeah. Sorry.
Just to further develop and clarify our position, all noise monitoring and management procedures working positively in collaboration with the local authority, environmental health officers will remain for the foreseeable future in the 2026 event, and we'll work in conjunction with all the residents and happy to meet, etc. In terms of the modest increase of levels, please note that we are going for a target level with every effort to minimise noise to protect the community at all times. Just to further develop the point Matthew made, we will not be operating consecutively at 65 for the full duration. And further to add to that, we will be present, me and my team, on site until 300 hours, if not beyond, licensing activities. Again, working in collaboration with environmental health officers. Nothing further to add, really.
Is that's the conclusion?
That is.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
So I will ask if there are any questions from my colleagues. To Mr. Singh, the reason that, just to explain, the reason I asked for something about decibels to be included is because decibels are a logarithmic scale, and it's quite difficult for lay people, anyone, for us as councillors to necessarily get our head round that. There's also, when you add to it, there's quite a lot of letters after it, so it's the A-weighted decibel over an average of 15 minutes for one of the limits, and the other one that was added as a condition is the C weighting. Would it be possible for you to give us, as best you can, a non-technical rundown, because I think that might actually help people understand what restrictions are being put on and how much that changes, if you're happy to do that.
Just for clarity, Chair, you're asking for a non-technical definition of A weighting and C weighting, is that correct?
I think it's a case of if you can explain why we have them.
Okay.
So my understanding is A weighting is about human perception, and C weighting is more to deal with a different type of noise. But it might be useful for others to have that from a professional rather than me, who may have misunderstood it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll further expand. The A weighting, you've got correct, is for the normal average person and human exposure hearing, average over a certain period of time, 5 minutes or 15 minutes in accordance with the old code of practice. The C weighting one is particular. It's an emerging new metric to assess low frequency noise, as you've referred to, the thump in the bass, prolonged periods, etc. It's linear, and following the review in 2025, the review of the licence, low frequency noise was taken into consideration, and we've applied limits 85 with an upper limit of 90, or the C weighting, and we hope in the emerging new guidance that those levels will be proposed when we see it, but there is no timescale of when the new guidance will be submitted in the future. I think
That's really helpful. Thank you. Are there any further questions or any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Joy.
I was actually quite pleased to hear that you're going to be doing additional sound checks just to make sure that it's actually not going over limits. I was just wondering, do you have a particular time that those will be scheduled? Just are they going to be a sort of like mid-morning kind of interval?
so. From a Joins Last point of view, I'll reflect on 2025. If you don't mind to answer that question, we will be there, me and my team, for the full duration on each day. So if the event opens at 11 o'clock, what time did we finish last year? If you don't mind. In the early hours of the morning, our team was there. We were there for the duration of 3 days.
It was about sound checks, actually.
Oh, was it sound checks?
It was sound checks.
Sorry. Yeah, so written into the noise management plan for an expected 2 hours immediately prior to the event. That will be not continuous, intermittent. We try and keep that to a minimum as far as practically possible in order to minimise the disturbance impacts on the local residents.
It's not to answer your question, councillor, but from memory, it's a condition I think Environmental Health have proposed that we're to advise people when that's going to be in advance. And there's no issue with us doing that. That would be part of our communications plan, because so people aren't caught unawares.
Just to further add for clarity, that would either be done by a letter drop, newspaper advert and or social media, and I'm more than happy to provide my contact details to any resident or objector seen here today.
Councillor Sankey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. You've answered virtually all my questions in what you've told us, so thank you for that. There's only one thing, and I think it was raised by the residents. I believe they met with a representative of your organisation back in December, and I think they were saying that things had changed between what they were told in December to January, and obviously that's caused quite a lot of bad feelings, so I just wondered what had happened there.
I can help with that. So we, and you will see it, actually, it's touched on in representation. We originally had given thought to the inclusion of an additional camping field. And there was a discussion around that. And when we were undertaking our pre-application consultation and dialogue, that was raised as part of the discussion. We didn't go forward with that. So it isn't that we've added something, it's that we didn't go ahead with something else. To be fair, I mean, I don't want to get this wrong, but I wasn't aware it had generated any bad feeling, other than if your sense was, well, it wasn't quite as we first expected, then that's a fair point. But it was, the layout is effectively the same, because the space is more than sufficient to cater for the capacity.
Any further questions? So one of the comments that someone made was about children wearing ear defenders. And actually, from my experience of going to music festivals in Germany, there is actually more of a requirement for children because their ears are still developing. And as a family festival, I don't think we can put that on as a requirement. But from my point of view, I would actually, if you're a family festival, you're encouraging children into a noise heavy area. Would that be something that you can actually promote with regards to the children attending if they're getting close to the stage, because their ears are probably more vulnerable than
So yeah,
ours?
let me deal with that. Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. To be blunt, it would be a legitimate criticism if we didn't, rather than it being a legitimate criticism because we do. Lots of families come to festivals, lots of parents, more likely than not, have been to festivals themselves, and then as they develop with young families, they bring their children along. It is commonplace to see ear defenders on, I'm going to say anybody under the age of 6, probably beyond 6, maybe not. Is that fair? Anybody? No. Yeah, you would expect that. And there are photographs, and you go on our website another time, but if you, as you often do, with small children on the shoulders of parents or guardians, watching an event, the children more often than not have it. The promotion of it, we're all very happy to. I can't recall, and forgive me if we do, but is there a stall that sells? Yeah, we have, I thought so. We have a stall that sells them. So if anybody forgets to bring them or suddenly thinks, oh, that's a good idea, then they're available on site for anybody who wants to take advantage. We probably can't oblige people to wear them.
Yeah, strongly encourages, I think, about where we get to. The only other question was about just sorry, I'll let you come back.
Forgive me, it's a tiny point, but it is to your point. The conditions on the licence that we've talked about are the off-site levels, because that's what attends to the representations. And we obviously focus on what the representations are. I've not taken you through our welfare policy because nobody is raising concerns about it. But there are on-site noise level conditions as well, which it's worth reminding ourselves of. And that does go to the issue of off-site propagation. But it actually goes to the, if I can call it, the health and safety concern that perhaps you're articulating, is that there are specific conditions about what may be permitted on-site in terms of volume, proximity to speakers and that sort of thing.
Thank you. And then another one for you, which was about the engagement. And again, I don't think we can condition it, but it's really, really keen that there is good engagement, especially with Southam Parish Council and any of the other parish councils that may well be affected. Again, we can't condition that, but it's just developing that working relationship would be encouraged.
So it's never easy to say no to a chair of the licensing committee, but can I say no in this way? I think you can condition it. If you are if you think that it's appropriate, and if I may be so bold, if you think there's a concern that we might not, condition it. I say that not in any way to be disrespectful to my clients, but because I have absolute confidence that we're going to be doing it anyway. And so, candidly, I'm not giving you a great deal if I'm honest. But if the view is, look, residents have raised issues, and we feel that it is appropriate in order to ensure that that engagement continues in the future, there's no issue with it being conditioned at all. It wouldn't, well, in the time I've known the client, it wouldn't cross their minds not to engage, but let's have a condition accordingly.
Perfect. Okay. That is more than I expected. So thank you very much. I will look to see whether there are any further questions. Nope. At this point, it looks like we move to give the applicant the final right of reply. Unless you are are you happy to take any further comments from the objectors at this point?
Forgive me, I haven't got your procedure in front of me. I'll take a steer from you tell me what the procedure says and I'll say yes to that. So forgive me.
I think we've got some flexibility because we want to make sure that everybody feels they've been heard. So if you're happy for us to go round and hear if there's any final remarks from objectors at this point, and then you will get your final right of reply. I can see Councillor Agg indicating. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed for the points we've raised so far. I wanted to know if there's any guidance for councils when it comes to deliberating over these issues, because I'm sure we're not alone. The 65 decibel for 15 minutes is the absolute maximum, the nearest residential property, for up to 4 events per year. And the lower limits, which we've had last year, are 55 decibels, where events are frequent or residents are very close. And I think Southam fits that. They are both close and we have frequent events at this venue. So for multiple day events, many councils apparently adopt a 55 decibel as a more appropriate standard. Now, if Cheltenham proposed to accept 65 for those 4 days, late into the night, therefore sits at the upper extreme of what guidance considers reasonable for residents' protection. I don't consider 65 decibels as standard and acceptable for a 4-day event when we are a venue which is used throughout the year. There are other events going on, so the community is exposed time and time again to amplified sound. They're very close to the venue. We've got documented severe disturbance in 2024. 2025 was fine, it kept within, but by increasing it to 65 potentially, if you're giving that as the max over a 15 minutes, it means you have to go over 65. You could be at 70 decibels for a period of time before it comes back down again. And therefore, we've increased the volume by additional 5 decibels. I would propose, if you were mindful, to keep it as it is, which is at the 55 going up to 60. And therefore, we have some form of harmony, given the fact that the site hasn't actually moved into the helicopter field where it has been previously in 2023. And those are the points I'd like to raise. It's the sound and the increase that we're objecting to if we cannot change the location. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other comments? Gentleman behind you, gentleman at the back, and then we'll come round.
Thank you. I'd just like to get clarification, if I can, in relation to the licensed area. In the CBC submission, there was reference to an extension of the licensed area, but I think in the presentation it was said that the area isn't changing. It's just to understand, what are the parameters?
So, no. Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, could you turn, that's it. So if you turn your mic off and
look, the officers here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the initial discussions with the officers, that was anticipated. In the event, when we submitted the application, that was not included. That's the answer, I hope. Yeah, we decided not to go ahead with it. We investigated it and we didn't think it was appropriate.
So just to clarify, the area that's being licensed will be the red line map.
Yes.
And that's what the application is looking to determine. So that, hopefully that helps. It's the map in the bundle.
So we're comfortable, even with a 50% increase in capacity, that can be accommodated within the footprint that exists.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, absolutely. And as are obviously the fire service and the health and safety service and all of the other officers, it is a very significant size site. This is not to suggest that there's any further ambition, but I suspect you could probably legitimately have another 10,000 there, for all I know, or maybe double the number. I don't do the calculus on this, but there is no suggestion from anyone that this isn't perfectly legitimately accommodated within the existing space.
Only the reason for raising that question is we would want to avoid sort of festival creep as such, in that we get to a level here, it's agreed then as a new plateau, and then we go again, and gradually we're taking up more and more of the...
I was going to say, from our point of view, we can only determine what's in front of us. We can't look at the future. I don't know whether that was what you were going to say, but we can only look at this application on its own particular merits, if that assists. And I think we are minded to ask the applicant and condition it, if we can find some words, to maintain that engagement with Southam Parish Council, because we do think that seems to be quite an important way of trying to rebuild a relationship. Given what was said between 2024 and 2025. So I'll let you finish summing up any further remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And as I said at the start of my submission, we were grateful for the efforts and the coordination last year. Just one final question, again, in relation to the significant increase in capacity from a traffic perspective. Is there a traffic plan? Has the traffic plan been agreed with GCC?
I can't speak to the agreement with GCC. Candidly, as it's the first week of March, I think the fair answer is no, but it's it's an engagement that continues. Obviously, we have traffic management consultants. We had them last year. We'll be having them this year. We'll be having them in the future. I'm bound to say that it's the point of significance. I'm sorry, but we don't accept that an increase is of such significance it could possibly undermine the licensing objectives. That isn't the same as saying it doesn't need careful management and needs to be done professionally and properly, but the licensing objectives couldn't fairly be said to be undermined by this increase.
If it helped, the council has the SAG, which is the Safety Advisory Group. So that was mentioned by the applicant. The Safety Advisory Group includes officers from this council, from Gloucestershire County Council, from the police, the fire service, the ambulance service. There will be a plethora of experts from this council trying to make sure that, or from hosted by this council, trying to make sure that any large event, whether that be Cheltenham, whether that be the races next week or whether it be this festival, have all of the risk management plans in place, the civil contingency plans, all of those things, because ultimately they have to assume that it will be safe, but and make sure that. But there is also contingencies for things potentially going wrong, so that almost unforeseen events. So please be assured, behind the scenes, for something this large, there is quite a lot of background. Final, gentleman.
Hopefully, very quickly. Firstly, the idea of increasing the sound from up to 60 to 65 dBs. We are dealing with a rural area out in Southam there. So, I mean, at night, it does become very quiet there. And the traffic's died down and such, so it is a quiet area. The other thing which I'm having slight difficulty with, there seems to be a contradiction in suggesting that the 55 to 60 dB sound levels are insignificant on Thursday, and a 5 dB increase is insignificant also. So why would you increase it by 5 dBs? I mean, either Thursday is, they're saying there's no sound on Thursday, there's no disturbance, no significant disturbance because there were no complaints last year, etc., etc. But the 5 dB increase is essential, and it's such a small increase, apparently, I could hardly notice it. So why is it necessary? That was it. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I will hand back to the applicant to allow you your final right of reply and to address these concerns, if you wish, and then we will retire to make our decision and draft the decision notice.
Thank you, Chair. What I'll do first of all, if I may, is just respond to a couple of the points that have been raised, and then I've just got a couple of other wrap-up points. So the first point is that it's suggested by the councillor that many councils adopt 55 dB as a standard. Mr. Singh doesn't know any, and none have been mentioned to you this evening, and it's no part of anything in the representations to suggest that. That is simply not our experience at all. The second thing is the councillor suggested that this is a 4-day event at 65 dB. Respectfully, we know that to be wrong. The Thursday is not. The Thursday is not changing, or is a new day, but at the existing levels. And you've got all of the environmental health officers' commentary about that. So I'm really sorry, but that is not to fairly describe the application. Councillor was good enough to say, though, well, I say good enough, that's not meant to be cheeky, but did say that potentially there would be problems. That's the nub of this case. Do you refuse it because you have an anxiety or a concern? Or do you manage the risk appropriately and allow the licence to go forward. And we say that the national guidance and your licensing policy clearly says what is likely to happen is what determines it. If you conclude the environmental health officer is wrong, if you conclude Tewkesbury Council are wrong, and that public nuisance will likely occur, then fair enough, refuse it. But I cannot for the life of me respectfully see that there's any actual evidence that it will likely undermine the licensing objectives. You have concerns being articulated. The only evidence that you have that is that the 15 complaints in 2024, about which a lot was made this evening, you have the confidence to know that that was what the review attended to, because I think it's agreed by everyone that because of the additional conditions that go to the C-weighted lower level restrictions, there's no anticipated problem here. There's also then reference, which I may have missed, and if I got this wrong, then I apologise, but there was some reference to, it could average at 70 or something. I mean, I really ask you just to look very specifically at the actual conditions. And what those effectively say is that there is a level to which we must adhere, breach of which would be a criminal offence. And 5 dB less than that is the level to which we should deliver. But we're not committing a criminal offence in the event that we exceed that level. And so I'm really not sure where the 70 comes from. The point about creep you made really, Chair, but it's a bit like asking for a pub that wants midnight on a Friday to be refused because there's a worry that in a couple of years' time it might ask for 1 a.m. It's the application that's in front of us that obviously we've got to deal with. The point about Safety Advisory Group obviously again touched on, but could I just make this point? The point that we say is of such significance about the Safety Advisory Group is it's a secondary lockstep. It's not the abandonment of supervision control today. It's not as though you say, right, good luck, Godspeed, see ya, hope you do a decent job. We are regulated properly every single day between now and the delivery of the event. And I do ask that any residual concerns that you may have, and to be fair, I'm entirely respectful of the fact that residents do have residual concerns, but there is, I'd suggest, comfort in the Safety Advisory Group grip of us, as well as your responsible authority colleagues and so forth. The other point then was about it's insignificant. And the apparent sort of contradiction, or the why would you do it if you're saying it's also insignificant, why would you do it? I'm afraid respectfully that is not to understand the way in which the licensing legislation is set up. The question one asks is why wouldn't you? It isn't fair. It's a permissive legislation. How is it fairly said that we undermine the licensing objectives? In which case, if that's the view, it shouldn't be granted. I accept that point. But it isn't the other way round, as perhaps was being suggested. It's not why are you doing it? It's why wouldn't you permit this? And I do think that that is sort of material, because what is fundamentally said here is that if you grant this, the licensing objectives will not be undermined. And I'm only repeating myself, but you don't have to take my word for that. You can discount my word. You can discount Mr. Singh's. But I think it respectfully is impossible to discount the officer. Are we likely to undermine the licensing objectives because we have a Thursday that stops at 11 p.m. that allows some campers to come on site a day early and for the traffic to be managed that way? Respectfully, I say it's impossible to conclude that we're likely to undermine the licensing objectives that way. Are we likely to undermine the licensing objectives because we're going to have an additional 2,500 people on site this year? Let's say 1 in 4 come in vehicles, an extra 800 cars, let's say. Is it said that those cars will cause public nuisance? I mean, candidly, I am going to default back to the Cheltenham Race Week. If 4,000 cars, it creates public nuisance, then we've got a bit of an issue. And then the third thing is, will 65 as an absolute limit rather than 60, but with a target of 60, will that create public nuisance? And everybody over here, including the officers, says no. And that can't likely be put aside, I suggest. Let's remember that practically the first words I think your licensing officer said in introducing the report was that they are the recognised leading authority. And so we are very respectful. We'll certainly do the engagement. We certainly accept that a condition has the benefit of transparency as well, it seems to me, so that everybody knows where they stand. We're not immune to that at all, but respectfully, we'd invite you to grant the application.
Thank you very much. Right, we will adjourn on reflection, because there's more of us than there are of you. We will leave the room. So you're free to sit here or grab a drink or make yourself use the amenities if you need to.
How long are we adjourning?
That is a good question. What's the time? Sorry? Yeah, we will look initially to adjourn until, 8:45. Right, thank you everyone for your patience. As a committee, we did sit there and go through quite a lot of the, well, all of the details, and I will now ask the legal officer to read our decision.
Thank you, Chair. At the hearing, the subcommittee heard from the representative of the applicant, a number of other persons, and the Environmental Health Department for Cheltenham Borough Council, who submitted a comprehensive report. The other persons' objections were raised under the licence and objective of public nuisance due to noise. No objections were received from any of the responsible authorities, and all relevant written submissions have been considered. The subcommittee had due regard to the Human Rights Act in respect to an objection read out in relation to one individual, the public sector equality duty which is engaged. The subcommittee considered this, and the public sector equality duty does not require a specific outcome, but the committee is balancing a testimonial from one person against the applicant's stated noise management plan, and the committee notes the 2025 condition about low frequency noise. The provisions of the Licensing Act 2003, which confer the powers of the licensing authority to deal with the application, the obligation to promote the 4 licensing objectives, and the relevant sections of the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy and Statutory Guidance. The Licence Subcommittee considered that it must carry out its functions with a view to promoting the 4 licensing objectives as set out in Section 4.2 of the 2003 Act. The Subcommittee cannot take into account representations which do not relate to one or more of those licensing objectives, and acknowledges that any representations which are received must be relevant and evidence-based. The subcommittee acknowledges that there is a concern from the objectors, but a lot of this seems to be based on the 2024 event and not the 2025, when additional conditions were added in relation to the low frequency noise and met as a result of the review of the licence. In terms of the evidence, the subcommittee has seen evidence from 2 sets of experts, Cheltenham Borough Council Environmental Health Officers, who are this council's officers, and the subcommittee give considerable weight to that representation, and a similar one from Tewkesbury Borough Council Environmental Health Officers, who are fully supporting but are independent of Cheltenham Borough Council. And given they are the ones who would be picking up the complaints in the Southam area, if they had concerns, one would have expected them to have objected. The subcommittee's decision is to grant the licence as applied for, save for an additional condition that the applicant engages in ongoing dialogue with Southam Parish Council pre and post the event and keeps a record of communication with the Parish Council. The subcommittee want residents of Southam to be informed beforehand of the event and how to provide feedback. The subcommittee acknowledges the residents' concerns, their attendance in person. Some of the issues raised are not material licensing concerns and is unable to take those into consideration. The committee acknowledges the residents' concerns in relation to the increase in the decibel number. The scale is logarithmic and noise management is a very technical profession. In the absence of an independent noise expert for the objectors, the committee has to rely on its own experts, the environmental health officers, and their monitoring of the event. In relation to the comments regarding parking on public highways, late night parties and wild camping, these are not material to the committee and cannot be taken into account. On balance, the technical professionals have said it is unlikely to cause public nuisance. If noise is a problem, then the fallback protections are the licence can be reviewed, and both environmental health departments have their own enforcement powers irrespective of the licence. This is a unanimous decision of the subcommittee. All parties are reminded that there are rights of appeal against this decision, and any appeal must be made to the Magistrates' Court and commence within 21 days of notification of the authority's decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. You can appreciate we did spend quite a bit of time on that. I would like to thank you all for your attendance this evening. I will now move on to the final agenda item, which is any other item the chairman determines to be urgent and which requires a decision. And you will all be very glad to hear that there are none. So at about, say, 9:05, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.